Elsewhere in the SEC, Lane Kiffin, of course, making headlines in the transfer portal as he always does, but has a really solid class here in 2024. Here's David Johnson of Inside the Rebels with more.
Yeah, I got to say the top storyline as far as Ole Miss high school recruiting is going is the fabulous job defensive coordinator Pete Golding as well as defensive line coach Randall Joyner have done in assembling what I think is one of the nation's best defensive line classes. It starts off with Kamarion Franklin, kid from right up the road in Lake Cormorant, Mississippi, a former 5-star, got knocked down to 4 stars, but Cam Franklin is a beast. And, he's not the only one in this class. You've got Cameron Beavers, a 4-star defensive lineman out of Bay Springs, Mississippi. You look around, you have Jeffrey Rush, another 4-star out of Pascagoula, Mississippi. This class is absolutely fantastic on the defensive line. And the guy that you can't leave out is William Eccles. He is a guy who went to the U.S. Army Combine in San Antonio back before his junior season, and he went through almost every drill as an offensive lineman. So we rated him a 3-star prospect here at 24/7 Sports as an offensive lineman. But man, you got to watch that defensive film. And our evaluators did. As soon as they saw it, William Eccles jumped up to a 4-star defensive tackle. And, when you put that collective group together, it's absolutely one of the best defensive line classes in the country, period.
So Lane Kiffin making waves in the transfer portal, but you heard David Johnson talk about the guys that they're building through the recruiting ranks on the lines of scrimmage. And that's what we say is the recipe for success, right? Because you're not going to go find an offensive lineman in the portal. It's a challenging position to find there. But what does this class tell you about Kiffin's roster building strategy?
They're doing it 3 different ways. Through the transfer portal, which is where Lane Kiffin has had as much success as anyone. They're doing it at the high school ranks. And then the junior colleges. And I think anyone at Ole Miss or at Mississippi State, you have to understand that JUCO ecosystem. The headliner for us is William Eccles. I know David Johnson would probably have him as the #1 player in the country. This class would rank #1 if David Johnson was doing it. But he was a big riser for us. We saw him at the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game. He was excellent. Alabama 5A Mr. Football, Mississippi 5A Mr. Football, 2-way lineman, 15 sacks. We got him in the All-American Bowl. And then Anthony Maddox, I mentioned him a little bit earlier when we were talking about Texas A&M, quarterback where the arrow was pointing up. Cam Franklin, they've just done a great job. 3 of the top 5 prospects in the state of Mississippi are set to sign with the Rebels or have already signed. It's been a while since they've been able to do that. Normally, it's the transfer portal. Now they're doing it through the high school ranks. I always compare high school recruiting, NFL draft. Lane Kiffin's buying in there.
Kiffin went on a journey in quarterback recruiting. He had Damon Williams, our video game star, committed early on in the cycle. Then he got Trevor Jackson, the Elite 11 finalist, to commit, and they end up with Maddox. So a nice little adventure that he went on, but I think he landed on a really good prospect there.
Yeah, we talk about Lane Kiffin and how you see his fingerprints all over this class, transitioning now to Kentucky. How does this look like maybe a Mark Stoops kind of group?
It's good on the defensive side of the ball, right? Kentucky has put some scares into some people in the SEC over the years. They got Jared and Jacob Smith up front, pair of twins, have kind of bounced around different high schools, finished at their high school careers in the Bluegrass State. We love these guys. Both of them are in the top 247. You got Brian Robinson, another pass rusher. He's an inside guy, an outside guy, testing numbers off the charts. Quashid Scott, saw him at the Shrine Bowl of the Carolinas, playmaking defensive back. I think you could play him in the nickel. He's related to Cam Smith, who's now with the Miami Dolphins. And then you also got linebacker Antoine Smith. He might be the fastest linebacker in America, 4.5 in the 40-yard dash. So when you look at Mark Stoops, what they have done since he has arrived there is they develop guys specifically in that front 7. I think all these guys have a chance to hit big, be potential all-SEC guys, and potentially play in the NFL.
The player that stood out to me when I was kind of looking at their list was tight end Willie Rodriguez, the in-state prospect there, 6'4", 240. He had over 30 scholarship offers. So at the time of the announcement, it was a huge pickup. So I thought I'd bring him up because I think he's got the size. He's 6'5", 240-ish or so, a top 40 prospect at that position. I think he's got a chance to see the field early on.
Normally, this is where I would transition to talking about another SEC East team, but you can wave divisions goodbye in the SEC. It's just a powerhouse of divisionless football, so interested to see how that affects things. But we're going to go to South Carolina because back-to-back top 20 classes for Beamer. That is incredibly impressive. And Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur has more on South Carolina's group.
The line of scrimmage has been a point of emphasis for this coaching staff, both sides of the ball, not just offense, where South Carolina's got 3 in-state commitments, guys who are going to come in as highly rated recruits, and Josiah Thompson and Cam Pringle and Blake Franks. But over on defense, they've got a 5-star defensive end, and Dylan Stewart from Washington, D.C., who is a really good pass rusher who can not only potentially play early, but maybe even start and be a difference maker for the Gamecocks coming off the edge. In the secondary, they've got a really talented player in Jalua Solomon, who's classified as an athlete, but will play cornerback for South Carolina and is someone who the staff is very high on. They think he could come in potentially and be a day one starter and even be a guy who's done in 3 years because he's off to the NFL. Very excited about him as a player. Over on the offensive side of the ball, again, they've got a receiver in Mazio Bennett from Greenville, South Carolina, who could come and help get that receiver room back in order and playing to the level that it needs to be, and giving some playmakers to Lenore Sellers, who is coming off a true freshman season and heading into his second year with the Gamecocks.
Hale said it, lines of scrimmage. That's the way that I would probably define this class. What's so impressive about what Beamer has been able to do on that side?
Got Dylan Stewart, right? So second 5-star in 24/7 Sports era for the Gamecocks. Nick Harbor last year. They could finish with 3. Josiah Thompson, the offensive tackle, they got committed. We saw him at the Shrine Bowl of Carolinas, just moved him up in the rankings. He is a huge get for the Gamecocks. They need to get better on the offensive line. Played 2 true freshmen here in 2023, Tree Babalade and Trovon Baugh. Both those guys were leaned on heavily down the stretch. Now they got Josiah Thompson coming in, who I think is a developmental guy, but he's got rare length, rare movement patterns. If they can get him going, that's 3 offensive linemen. That's huge for South Carolina. We talk about the transfer portal. Everyone wants the big bodies. They have a chance to really shore up that line with Josiah Thompson. And then obviously Dylan Stewart, big body out of the DMV. South Carolina's had success in that region, so like all of that for them. Yeah, to your point, Emily, about the lines of scrimmage and how do you get a player like Dylan Stewart ready to make an impact? Well, you pair him on the practice field against a big body like Cam Pringle. He's 6'7", 340. So maybe part of Georgia's class at some point. Yeah, Blake Franks is a big dude as well. I saw him at the Shrine Bowl. So these are big guys that Dylan Stewart has to muscle up and get past on the practice field to get him ready for those games. And then eventually the Cam Pringles of this class are also ready to step in and make an impact. Speaking of big guys, none bigger than a huge haul for Missouri and Williams Nwaneri, top 5 player in this class. Smoke Dixon has what we like to call a breakdown or a smokescreen of one of the top guys.
Williams Nwaneri, an athletic, big, thick, physical, athletic, scheme versatile, meaning he can play in the 3-4 or 4-3 defensive lineman. Let's jump to the smokescreen to get into this guy a little bit more. First one, you're going to see him lined up as an edge player. Good bend. Now you're going to see him go speed to power. That's his ability to now come out of his hips, explode with his hands, and now find the quarterback with his burst to finish with a sack. Big man physicality you love. Let's get to the second play. Now you're going to see him lined up now, hands in the ground. Quickness comes there. Now finds the gap, squeeze. Now you can see a 6'6" guy now bend. Eyes under chin, makes the tackle. Athletic guy that can bend, hard to find those guys, but when you find one, you got to keep them. Let's go to number 3. Now you're going to see him lined up here on the right side. Good get off. Now you're going to see his ability to bend, get underneath that tackle. Right. Now you're going to see his ability now to run on a straight line and close. Come underneath for the sack. Big, physical, scheme versatile defensive lineman that can win on first down, second down, third down. And if you got him on fourth down, this guy here can make the stop too as an interior defender.
Appreciate the breakdown and the smoke screen. Fantastic name for a segment. We'll try to get to that as much as possible. But when you look at this Missouri class as a whole, how have you seen Eli Drinkwitz parlay on-field success to success on the trail?
Well, the transfer portal is a big reason they had the season they did here in 2023. And then they got this sneaky good group there. They've been down in Florida. They were in Alabama. I mean, Missouri, as its own, doesn't produce a ton of NFL talent, so you have to get creative. We've seen them in Texas before. I love what they're doing in the defensive trenches. They got Elias Williams committed, Jalen Brown, who was an excellent at the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game. We'll see how they finish it out. I mean, 5-star committed from the state, and the smoke breakdown we just saw, it's a solid group. James Madison, a wide receiver out of the powerhouse that is St. Thomas Aquinas, a bunch of difference makers. I love this recruiting class. It is one I'm buying stock in.
And it's become a place that I think is a real destination for players in that area, right? We've even mentioned Ryan Wingo, and that's been a possibility for them for a long time. And to get a Williams Nwaneri to buy in and to say, yeah, I'm going to stay home and represent for Missouri, I think it only helps you in 2025 and 2026. And if Coach Drinkwitz is able to then take that next step, he already has those recruits and those players, those locals that everyone can buy in with already established.
Especially in that area. We mentioned Texas and Georgia and Florida and California as these big talent-rich states, but there's a lot of talent in that St. Louis area. So to keep them home and suit up for the Tigers is a huge deal for what they're trying to build. Elsewhere in the SEC, the head hog, Sam Pittman, has put together a top 30 class. Here is Danny West from Hog Sports on that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways from this year's Arkansas class was the defensive staff and their ability to go into some new places that don't often produce a lot of Razorbacks, states like Mississippi and Alabama, and they finally found some success in those states this year. When the state of Alabama produces a 4-star quarterback and a 4-star defensive end for the Razorbacks in the same cycle, that's a pretty good run for the Hogs. So now you can team up Kavion Henderson, a 4-star defensive end out of Leeds High School in Alabama. Team him up with your homegrown Charleston Collins out of Little Rock Mills, a top 247 All-American selection. Those are two that Arkansas feels really good about for the future of that defensive line. So going into new places in recruiting was probably one of the biggest storylines, especially with their success in Mississippi and Alabama this year.
Andrew, you look at this Arkansas class, what stands out to you the most?
Have they got Bradley Shaw yet?
Yeah, they're waiting for it.
The linebacker. KJ Jackson, the quarterback, had a chance to study him as we went through the senior arms. This guy reminds me a little bit of KJ Jefferson. I don't know what the reaction is going to be from the Arkansas fans about that. I think he's a left-handed version of KJ. He can beat you with his arm. He can beat you with his legs. What stands out about him, highest yards per attempt of any of these quarterbacks we charted here in the 2024 cycle. 13 yards a pass attempt. He can push it down the field. He can work under center. I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do there in Fayetteville.
We mentioned Charleston Collins earlier, a player that we're going to see at the All-American Bowl down in San Antonio. They beat out Ole Miss for him, and you know, I think the summer was such an important part of the process when it was time to recruit, and this was before the season, right? This is when a lot of these coaches are still able to sell promise and potential and all that. So to hang on to him is super important considering the season that Arkansas had.
Yeah, and then another headliner for us, I mean, Selman Bridges, the cornerback. Everyone's looking for the length out on the perimeter. I think he's over 6'3", close to 6'4". Tyreek Woolen, the comp for him initially early on, maybe not as fast as Woolen, who is now with the Seattle Seahawks, came out of UTSA, but in the same mold. So 3 top 247 guys. Bradley Shaw, the linebacker, would make number 4. There's a lot to like about this recruiting class.
Mississippi State, new head coach there, Jeff Lebby, coming in from Oklahoma. And when we look at what it's like when you have to come and join a new program, it's all about keeping the class together. It's not about building at that point. He's only been there for about 3 weeks. So how will you evaluate Lebby's job of coming in and kind of steering the ship there?
Well, he's already made some splashes on the recruiting front. Got Michael Van Buren committed, quarterback out of St. Francis Academy. He's about as battle-tested as they come. SFA played the most difficult high school football schedule I think ever assembled at IMG Academy. They played in Hawaii, they were in St. Louis, all over the country. Michael Van Buren took his shots, but he hung in there. I thought he was impressive in the final game he played against IMG, like I said. They've added some receivers as well. I think for Jeff Levy, the big thing is going to be the transfer portal. And then I said that junior college ecosystem with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. You have to recruit that if you're going to be in Mississippi. I think he's going to be able to do it. I've made some phone calls on Jeff Levy. Their collective is all in. When he got off the plane, I think he was wearing some badge for the collective there in Starkville. So impressive start so far, I think, for Levy.
Michael Van Buren, a former Oregon commit, so he has a lot of promise, a lot of that dual threat ability. He took a beating in the game that I went to see him against St. John Bosco, but he hung tough in the pocket and has that ability to escape pressure in the pocket. The one thing that I think Jeff Levy has to do is identify what he wants that roster to look like, because there's been obviously some coaching changes. The death of Michael Leach, didn't help things in terms of the roster building. So Jeff Levy needs an identity of what he wants that team to do.
And then real quick, I think they got a sleeper out of South Florida. They flipped Elijah Canyon from FAU this morning. That's one that's going to fly under the radar, but I wouldn't be surprised. Mississippi State, they've turned out some NFL defensive backs in recent years. I know they're fired about that there in Starkville. He had a heck of a senior season.
If you want to learn more about your team's haul from the 2024 class, be sure to check out your favorite team site, or as always, just go to 247sports.com.